What the awakening is for is so that when this day arrives, and I do think we're at the beginning of, they're unleashing a bioweapon. They are rolling out martial law. It's begun. And so the purpose of the awakening, I think, is to bring us awake spiritually.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Say, before I begin this interview with Greg Reese, just a few quick notes. We're in the thick of it now. As I've been warning, an economic collapse on the back of a pandemic would be a worst case scenario. Nothing I even imagined possible just a few years ago. Now tonight, Sunday night, we're seeing S&P futures crash, halted limit down once again, with gold and treasuries soaring after a historic Fed panic. Well, what does that mean? How did they panic? Here's how. Powell cut rates to zero tonight in an emergency announcement. He also announced $700 billion in QE5 and unveiled enhanced global swap lines. What is he so afraid of? I'll tell you what he's afraid of. They're deathly afraid of another electronic run on the banks, as we saw on September 11th, 2008. You'll recall the testimony from Representative Kanjorski, who said there was an electronic run on money market accounts in the United States that, had they not closed the window, trillions would have been pulled out, which would have led to a U.S. economic collapse and then a global economic collapse.
They decided to close the operation, close down the money accounts, and announce a guarantee of $250,000 per account so there wouldn't be further panic out there. And that's what actually happened. If they had not done that, their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed. Now, we talked at that time about what would happen if that happened. It would have been the end of our economic system and our political system as we know it.
So we're on the precipice of something very, very historic and potentially very, very dangerous for each and every one of us. So I just wanted to share that. And in this interview, we discuss the myriad theories about this virus, its origins, and what it may be used for. It's a really gripping interview. Greg does a very nice job here. So thanks so much for tuning in. If you don't mind, though, just a quick word about this interview's sponsor, redpillliving.com/SGT. It's a site built by patriots for patriots, and you can get many of the things you need and use daily right here at redpillliving.com/SGT, including some of the best coffee in the world at very fair prices, and that includes K-Cups for your Keurig, if you'd like those, Carbon Shield 60, which is very good for your health, and even colloidal silver super concentrate, some of which I ordered myself today. Now, because demand is so high, the site is beginning to run low on certain stocks, like, for instance, liposomal vitamin C and some of the others. So get your orders in now. Orders are being filled, obviously, on a first-come, first-served basis. And you can use coupon code SGT to save 10% off of any order. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's great to have you back, and it's great to have back on the line my good friend, video journalist from Infowars, Greg Reese. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Sean? Good to talk to you.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for coming on. I should let the audience know that by design, you and I talked for about 45 minutes before we officially hit record here, because we wanted to process all of these things that are going on in our world. At the top of the list is coronavirus. And as I was explaining to you, there's so many different camps of belief now on this thing that I thought it would be smart if we take people through what I think those camps are, and then you can help us break it down.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So in the mainstream media, which includes the Wall Street Journal that did a hit piece on me, which includes Joe Rogan, who just had on Michael Osterholm, an infectious disease epidemiology expert. According to these people, the coronavirus mutated naturally on its own in a wet market, no question about it. But these people also believe that it is very real and it's a real threat. All right, that's camp number one. Camp number two would include people like Cliff High, Mike Adams, and Chris Martenson, I think all of whom believe this thing was bioweaponized and it is a real threat. That's camp number 2. Now, camp number 3 includes people in the alt media who believe this whole thing is a hoax, or it is partially real and being used to run cover for deep state arrests. Now, for me personally, I draw the line on that one. I don't think it's being used as cover for deep state arrests. There's a 4th camp, and that's the 5G camp. So I'd like your response on the first 3 camps, and then I'll play a soundbite regarding 5G.
I'm going to start with the 3rd camp that think that this is mass arrests happening, because that's the most perplexing, I think, and it's what's been causing, I think, the most. That along with the people that think this is going to be a horrible thing. Those are the 2 voices that are just yelling at each other all over social media. And I've been thinking quite a bit about that because I can't imagine. I mean, I've been fascinated by Q. I find the whole thing extremely fascinating. If it isn't Trump, no matter what it is, it's an interesting story. Just like crop circles. No matter what crop circles are, they're very interesting. No matter what UFOs are, they're very interesting and all that. So Q is very interesting to me. And I've been following carefully. And there's been plenty of moments where I've seen, things that don't make sense, things don't add up. So I never understood why people would put full faith into Q. And I also, if Q is legitimately the white hats or the good guys, whatever you want to say, I can't imagine that the source would even expect or want people to put all their full faith, because it's not like there's a lot of, even if it's military intelligence, there's a lot of disinformation going out for the enemy. I would say you could even say it mostly serves feeding the enemy disinfo. But anyways, let's just forget about all that. And I do not see the benefit to remaining passive in a time like this. This is the most disruptive moment we've had in the past 3 years. The past 3 years, we've been experiencing a challenger in the ring, President Trump. That much is for certain, in my opinion. In my opinion, the enemies of the president are clear. They've made themselves clear, and they're all the right enemies. So I support him simply because he has all the right enemies. All the people that I consider the enemy hate him. So that is enough for me to support him all the way till the end. But I don't think that he is like a miracle worker. I don't think that I don't have to do anything and I can just sit here and eat popcorn and watch the show. I think that if that's being sold to people, then it's definitely a lie, because that just does. I mean, that's basically accepting your role as a sheep or a pet. If we want a golden age and if we want a renaissance, then it seems to make sense to me that we're going to have to earn that. We're going to have our own trials and tribulations, our own suffering, and work very hard to get there. And it's a sacrifice that a lot of us are willing to make, not so that we're going to have a better life, so that our children and our grandchildren will have a life similar to what we had growing up. That's how I feel. And so why? I think it simply comes down to that some people have a very hard time comprehending the potential of real evil. I think they're so far, all the hoaxes that we've seen from the Democratic Party are really just lies, theater and lies, which is, that's bad enough. But I think because of that, maybe, and because people really don't grasp that there's a cabal that's totally willing to kill millions of us. I mean, they've been talking about it. They've been celebrating it. They've been selling us on it. Hollywood's been preparing us for it. And so that's the only sense I can make. And then a perfect analogy of that is a good friend of mine who I think is a smart guy. I think he's I don't think he's a coward. I have a lot of respect for him. And he was telling me about that Joe Rogan episode, and he was telling me about how it occurred naturally. I think he was even talking about the seafood market and stuff like that. And then I let him finish. And then when I told him all the evidence that's been put out from India, from Dr. Boyle about it being a bioweapon, he heard it as if he recognized what I was saying was more sensible. but yet he chose the more comfortable story. And you could he almost laughed at himself when he did it. And I'm not making fun of him. I mean, I respect the guy, but it was very interesting to me to see. And, they say some people, or they say most people would prefer a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. And so I think that's what we're experiencing, is that, because in my opinion, for the past 3 years, the president's confidence and demeanor has been as if we're kicking ass and taking names. But it's not like that anymore. Ever since this happened, he looks like he's getting his ass kicked a little bit. And I think it's important to take notice. And I would imagine a lot of these people that are clinging to hope see it too. And that I would imagine that it's making them uncomfortable. But their solution perhaps is to be optimistic. I think we can be optimistic and also accept reality, a harsh reality. So that's my opinion on that one. And the other two are simple. I also think people that choose to accept that it is not a bioweapon are people that are either uninformed, misinformed, or the same camp that I was just talking about, the people that just would prefer to say, no one, like 9/11. There are people that said, no one would ever do that to their own people, or no one's capable of that. Yes, they are. And a lot of people are. As far as the other camp where people are taking it very seriously, if I had to choose one, I would choose that one. I think I don't see myself directly in any of these camps, but I kind of had been expecting this. Because I have an advantage because when I was 5 years old, I experienced a bit of evil. And so I grew up in a world where I was very cautious of every stranger. I still consider every stranger a threat, until I get to know you. And so for me, it's not out of the realm of reality that a group of people would do this. And so I'm not surprised. And for me, it's more like, okay, it's here now. It's happening right now. And so it seems smart to me to be prepared.
Well, we also have the telegraphs, right? We also have these telegraphs of these things before they happen. We have the passage from the Dean Koontz book. I think the book was written in 1981.
Yeah.
Then we have that soundbite from Bill Ryan from Project Avalon saying in 2010 that the 2005 whistleblower in the city of London was at these meetings in which they were laughing about China catching a cold.
And these people in this meeting were laughing about this. They said, China will catch a cold.
They're going to release a bioweapon. So we also have these telegraphs. So I'm with you on camp number one. I think it probably was bioweaponized. There's a lot of evidence to support that. But, to the point of what you were saying, Joe Rogan's guest, Michael Osterholm, when asked by Joe Rogan, and I know this because my wife was listening to it at my daughter's urging, and I could hear it playing. And when they got to the part where Joe said, what's all this talk about it possibly being bioweaponized? And Michael Osterholm said, Joe, let me give you a little bit about my background first. Brag, 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 brag. So, Joe, let me just jump to the chase. No, there's no way this is a bioweapon. This is nature doing what nature does. This is what happens with these things, right? And it's just, right, the infectious disease epidemiology expert is doing his job to allay everybody's fears that it was a bioweapon. And my wife says, honey, this guy says it's not a bioweapon. So right there, everything I've told her goes out the window. I think you're right. People are more comfortable thinking that nobody could be so evil. I guess there's an additional camp, and then I'll play that 5G soundbite. The additional camp is a camp I also agree with. Coronavirus, whether real or embellished, is cover for another banker bailout or possibly a total collapse. I think we could agree that's another reason for it. I think it's more likely that coronavirus is going to run cover for a collapse than it is for mass arrests.
I think that's what it is. No, I'm agreeing, but I'm saying that's where I feel too. I think, and that's just what my gut's telling me. And it caused me actually to do a lot of research into global currency resets. And the information that I found actually, I think, adds credence to the idea that that's what's happening. But that's what I think is happening, is that this is an excuse to reset the global currency, and probably many other things. I'm sure there's a lot of purposes behind this.
Yeah. Now, for those wondering, I have been a little under the weather. I'm feeling much better now, but my voice is a little weird still. But otherwise, I'm okay, guys. So I wanted to play this soundbite. I think this is very important. It's going to be a couple minutes long, but I think it's extremely important given where this thing started in Wuhan. And the name of the person talking is Dr. Thomas Cowan, MD. Now, this soundbite was recorded on March 12th, 2020, so it's very fresh, at the Health and Human Rights Summit in Tucson, Arizona. Listen to Dr. Thomas Cowan.
And I will only finish by pointing out that there has been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. And I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. It's called 5G, where they now have 20,000 radiation-emitting satellites, just like the radiation-emitting thing in your pocket and on your wrist and that you use all the time. That is not compatible with health. I'm sorry to say it, it's not compatible with health. That is a water destructuring device. And for any of you who say, yeah, well, we're not electrical beings, we're just physical matter, then don't bother doing an EKG or an EEG or a nerve conduction test, because we are electrical beings and the chemicals are only the byproduct of those electrical impulses. And I'll finish with, anybody want to make one guess as to where the first completely blanketed 5G city in the world was? Exactly. So when you start thinking about this, we are in an existential crisis here, folks, the likes of which humankind has never seen. And I don't want to go all Old Testament prophet on you, but this is something that is unprecedented.
I trust you could hear that okay, Greg?
I heard it great, yeah.
Yeah, so that's another camp, is that this thing is 5G enhanced as well, if not all at the fault of 5G. I don't know which is true. I think perhaps a combination of all of these things are true. Perhaps it's a bioweaponized enhanced by 5G.
Yeah. Well, my second report I did on coronavirus covered the 5G in Wuhan, which I found rather interesting. And it was actually launched on Halloween of like a year ago, almost on. No, it's not Halloween. It was Friday the 13th. I was confusing the two. It was launched on Halloween of 2019, which seems strange. It's a strange day to pick, at least for an American. And now we're seeing that the first cases actually were showing up in early December. So that's very interesting. Also, I just read recently that Italy, 5 cities in Italy, at least 5, it was around 5 or 6, also launched 5G in June of 2019. Also very interesting. Italy's also having a horrible time with this. I also heard that 5G was on cruise ships. I haven't seen anything that showed it was on that particular cruise ship, but that's also interesting. And I just saw a video recently of a woman, and I haven't checked any of her information. I just watched her going over papers. I haven't done my own research or anything, but she was pointing out how 5G affects the oxygen in the air, and if you have it amped up high enough, it will give people they will have a hard time breathing. So I've been aware of this other camp that you just brought up myself. And there are also people that are saying now that viruses don't exist and that it's all phony, and that the 5G is actually giving people the sick symptoms, and they're blaming it on a virus that doesn't exist because no viruses exist. I'm not really ready for that one yet. I certainly need to see a lot of evidence for that. I tend to think that what makes sense to me is the virus is real, and the 5G weakens your immune system. I would certainly buy that it weakens your immune system, and perhaps even messes with your pulmonary, your lungs and stuff. So like this woman was saying, so like you mentioned, they're working together, and that's kind of what we saw in China. Like Wuhan seemed to got hit real hard. Italy, same thing. So, and it makes you really want to learn more about 5G because they're talking about bringing that out here now.
Yeah, I buried the lead. I can't tell you, after this many years of doing this, how do I constantly bury the lead? The name of the presentation there by Dr. Thomas Cowan is Coronavirus Caused by 5G. So that entire 10-minute video is one people should watch in its entirety. I will link it below this video. You guys can watch the whole thing because he speaks in part to exactly what you just said. I'm not a doctor. I can't even recap what he said. Watch it for yourselves, folks. There's so much more going on here than meets the eye. And I think that we need this president to start to recognize the dangers of 5G. That much we can all agree on, because we all know it was fast-tracked. We all know there was no safety studies done. The FCC wanted this so badly approved. Come hell or high water, to hell with public safety. The trillions of dollars are more important. I remember the FCC chair saying that. What was his name? Tom Wheeler?
Yeah.
What a demon.
Yeah.
I mean, what a profoundly bad guy.
And will generate tens of billions of dollars in economic activity.
And what makes it suspicious also is when you go to the actual, I'll call it propaganda of the source that's pushing the 5G, they'll list the benefits of it. And it's all written out as if it's supposed to sell it, but it doesn't sound like it's going to benefit us. What it benefits is it's going to make AI work better, which is probably the main function of it. That's the number one benefit, is it's going to make artificial intelligence be able to be rolled out and work better. As far as us, it only benefits us by giving us a little faster speed for video downloads. And really, who cares? I mean, how much more faster do we need? It seems like, to me, that's the only benefit they're telling us, because I don't see how having AI everywhere is going to make my life any better. That actually seems like it's just adding to the nightmare we're already in. And perhaps that's what this is all about, is AI. But I don't understand 5G. And when I look at what they're pushing and what they're saying it's good for, it makes me even more suspicious of it, because it doesn't even sound like it's that good.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I've said the exact same thing. My life was working just great with 4G. 4G seems to be working just fine, but 5G can be weaponized. Maybe that's why Tom Wheeler wanted to have it fast-tracked so bad. I'm having a hard time with my voice here, but you said something really interesting in our pre-talk. You were talking about the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah, there's the boy who cried wolf, and it's also The Sky is Falling. Also, I believe it's the same story, and I believe there is a Disney cartoon about The Sky is Falling, but the same story. And growing up, very familiar with it, and I always just assumed, I don't know if I was taught this, but I just always assumed that the story was about the boy. And that the moral of the story was, don't go around telling lies, or else people won't believe you. And I do think I remember that that's the moral that at least a lot of people kind of taught me, or was. I don't know, maybe not. But now I think it's about the people. And now that I think about it, especially The Sky is Falling, which is the same story. The boy who cried wolf really wasn't, in both situations, they kind of were tricked into thinking they saw something they didn't see. And so their reaction was proper. And over time, the people just stopped listening to that, because they chose to go to sleep rather than always stay vigilant. And so now that's what I'm thinking the moral of that story is. The moral of that story is to always stay vigilant. Doesn't mean believe everything you're told, but it means listen to everything you're told. Take it seriously. Especially if it's something like, there's a wolf in our midst about to kill us. You don't want to just blow that off. Especially if it's, the sky is falling or whatever. You want to pay attention to these things. Especially if there's a killer virus out there that's, 6 times, it's more than 6 times. They're saying now, according to the numbers that we're getting from South Korea and Japan, unless those have all been faked, which I find that a little hard to imagine. But if that data is real, then we're dealing with something that's historically bad. They're saying it's looking even bad. It's going to be much worse than the Spanish flu. And so if someone's telling you that, then you ought to listen. You ought to at least say, well, maybe they're right, and maybe I'll get 3 months of food supplies just in case they're right, and then whatever. And maybe I'll even share that with my friends, hey, don't get scared, don't get worried, but this is what's going on. And you might want to, prepare, always be prepared, always stay vigilant. I think maybe once again, I think I have an advantage of this because I tend, a stranger to me, stranger danger. All strangers are dangerous, and everything I think all things are possible. So if someone tells me something, and this is kind of recently, I've been asleep for many years of my life, but now I think, I think that's what that story's about. And I'm seeing it in real time. I'm seeing these people that are saying it's just the flu, another swine flu, swine flu wasn't a ride in the park. Neither was H1N1, but I tend to think now maybe there's a psychology behind it. Maybe the enemy knows this, maybe the enemy understands our psychology. And so they gave us, a smaller epidemic, these non-epidemic viruses, and they hyped them up. Maybe even 2000 was part of that, Y2K, I'm sure the people that were behind hyping that knew it was all nonsense, but let's give them a scare. Maybe even Orson Welles' War of the Worlds on the radio. Maybe that was a test, all working up so that when the real time comes, and they've been planning it, everyone will just be like, I'm not falling for that again. And they're just going to not do anything. And these are the people, unfortunately, that are going to end up begging to get into the FEMA camps so they can get some shitty rations. Sorry for my language, and probably have to accept some type of digital currency. Who knows? Maybe even marked in a chip in their left hand. And while the rest of us who, took time to maybe prepare, at least we have a fighting chance. And at least we maybe become reacquainted with, the spirit inside of us, the survival spirit inside of us, that rugged individual spirit inside of us. I think we could all do very well to be reacquainted with that part of us. We are a generations. There's a lot of people making fun of boomers, but boomers were just the first generation of all of us who have been raised as pets with our games and our toys, and we're like a bunch of kids. And now we're facing a situation that really requires us all to really muster up all of our strength and all of our spirit and help each other and fight for what we want. We can't expect to have a golden age renaissance by just sitting on the couch and eating popcorn. That's how we've lived for generations right now. If we want that golden age, we are going to have to do something. Now, I understand that's not the most obvious thing. What can we do? But you can start by being prepared. You can start by, taking precautions, and maybe just stop, rooting for this anonymous source that says everything's going to be okay. You don't got to worry about nothing.
Well, I'm with you on the Q thing. I like Q. I follow Q. I think Q is a legitimate group of white hats, but I also don't think just sitting back and trusting any plan in the face of something like this is the wisest choice, and to not prepare because you think it's a hoax, because you may be right and you may be wrong. But I think the important part that you hit on is a boost in spirituality. And you didn't even know it because you didn't listen to the whole video. I hadn't played it for you, but that's exactly what Dr. Thomas Cowan says as he wraps up his presentation. Let me play the end of his presentation for you. I think you're going to find it to be spot on with your thinking, Greg.
And I'm just going to finish with one more thing, which I like too, is a quote from Rudolf Steiner. And by the way, this was around 1917, so there was a different time. In times when there were no electrical currents, when the air was not swarming with electrical influences, we're talking 1917, it was easier to be human. For this reason, in order to be human at all today, it is necessary to expend much stronger spiritual capacities than was necessary a century ago. So I'll just leave you with whatever you can do to increase your spiritual capacities, because it's really damn hard to be a human being these days.
I mean, tell me that doesn't resonate with you.
Oh yeah, and it's also I think it's very interesting that in 1917 he was saying that there was a loss of spirit and humanity from. I mean, basically they just had electrical light. I mean,
they had a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what we're bombarded with today.
Oh, we're swimming in it. We're enslaved in it. I'm looking for my phone. I have a serious issue in life because I'm just always doing this, and I'm just always doing this, and I'll tell myself it's kind of my job. I'm always looking for the news and stuff. But I mean, I dream of a life. I think my whole life I've dreamed of a life of being more human. And I mean, I couldn't agree more with what he was saying. I think more than ever right now, people need to begin to remember who we are. It's like, when I talk about Q, I like Q as well. And there's clear evidence that there's clearly a war going on behind the scenes. That much is clear, at least to me. But I think Q, the purpose of the information is to give you knowledge. That's why there's questions asked and not statements made. Because when you ask the question and you find the answer, you then gain that knowledge. And so it's offering us an opportunity to rise up and be who we are. It's not inviting us to sit down and do nothing. I see no evidence that that's what Q is doing. Q is asking us to rally together. And it's most likely now it's seeming like it's to prepare us for this moment right now, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And when I first kind of woke up back in 2004, I thought everyone was waking up, and I guess they were, but I thought there was going to be this massive great awakening, and like everybody would open their eyes, and then that would defeat the enemy. Now I'm realizing that was a child whistling past the graveyard, wishful hoping. There's no way it could go down like that. What the awakening is for is so that when this day arrives, and I do think we're at the beginning of, they're unleashing a bioweapon. They are rolling out martial law. It's begun. And so the purpose of the awakening, I think, is to bring us awake spiritually, which really, to put it in simple terms, simply means get out of your head, stop worrying about the future, stop being haunted by something that happened in the past, be centered in the present, aware of your surroundings, aware of everything you hear, you see, you touch, you feel. Pay attention, because we're in some very strange times. I think anything could happen. It's highly unpredictable. It's highly dangerous. And more than ever, we really need to be acquainted with that present spirit inside of us. The spirit inside of us is always present. So like when people talk about being present or being now, it's really just a trick of shutting your mind off. That's really all it is. Because the mind is constantly making noise, and that noise is generally going to either be fear about what could happen or some type of emotion about something that did happen that you need to let go of. So you got to let go of things that are haunting you, and you got to stop worrying about the future. That's why meditation helps, because meditation is simply a practice. You focus on one thing, your breath, the sense of the air coming in, whatever. You focus on one thing, and it's hard because your mind is fighting you. Your mind is trying to drag you down. Your mind is trying to make you afraid or ashamed or something. But if you practice long enough, you can make that go away, and then you're with your spirit, and your spirit is always present. Your spirit is, I wouldn't say it's God, but I would say it's the closest thing we have. It's the closest connection we have to God. And if we can connect to that, then we have nothing to worry about. I believe if we can connect to that present spirit will know when to go, we'll know where to go, when to go, what to do. We won't even have to worry about it, I don't think. There's a passage in the Bible. I'm not totally fluent in the Bible. I just happened to come across it, and it was basically saying, fear not. If you're walking God's path, you're always going to be in the right place at the right time. That's sort of a modern day nomenclature for it. But I feel that's true. And if I am praying for anything right now amidst all these different camps and all these tribes and everything, is to see this spirit awaken. Because the more people that awaken this spirit, and like I said, I don't think that that's just going to make the enemy go away, but it gives us a chance to defeat the enemy. It gives us a chance to create a world that we want rather than just hoping someone else does it for us. And through the process of this, we are going to experience, the fear is going to go away. Once we start living this, we're going to have such a sense of purpose like we've never had before. Because the last generation that really had a real strong sense of purpose like this was, the World War II generation. Since then, it's been mostly, well, I don't want to take suffering. There's been some wars and some stuff, but as far as the general population, at least here in America and probably in the Western world, we've been domesticated into passive pets. And I think that's why you're seeing so many people, the popcorn meme. I got sick. That popcorn meme was funny maybe 2 years ago when I thought, people are going to get arrested. All right, cool. And it's gotten pretty annoying right now. You know, how long is it going to take for, and I don't want to digress too much, but that actually makes me think of the Boy Who Cried Wolf story, because it's interesting, because you got these people that keep being told by Hannity and all these other heads, just around the corner, TikTok, TikTok, and they don't seem to ever get enough of it. I got fed up with it a long time ago. And now I'm personally back on topic with the rising of the spirit and of individual rugged individualism. I can say from my experience, I remember a time I always felt detached from humanity, I guess you could say. When I was younger, I used to hope for everything to fall apart so that we would be forced to go back into the woods. I used to think that was the answer. I used to think the answer was, I thought, modern civilization is the problem. We just need to go back to being like indigenous peoples and stuff like that. I don't feel that way anymore. I love the innovativeness of man. I love the creativity of man. I love the idea of building not just a home, but a society. I think these are all very exciting things, and I may be wrong, but where I am at now is that the loss of humanity, you don't have to burn it all down to have it. I think it would be smart to get rid of these, if that's possible. Cell phones, I think it's possible that we could maybe change things around to where, back in the old days, a lot of people might be too young to remember, but there was a time when your phone was at home, and if you weren't at home, there was a real kind of a cool sense of peace and quiet that people couldn't call you. And then when you'd go home, you'd listen to your messages and you'd make your calls and you're done. There was more simple like living. Now we have this thing, and then first it was a pain, because now people can call you all the time, and if you don't pick up, they might nag at you. Why didn't you pick up?
It's an enslavement device. See,
it is.
Young people listening to this have no idea that they're fish in a fishbowl. They don't know what they were born into, because if you go back 30 years, we didn't have those things. We had landlines.
Yeah, it was better.
We didn't have the internet, and I love the internet, and I'm not slamming the internet, but we didn't have any of the social media that make kids feel isolated. No Instagram, no Snapchat, no TikTok. And it's just, I don't know. Now you have kids on TikTok celebrating their abortion. It's just, these kids have no idea what they've been born into. And it's really, really sad. It's just more evidence of the enemies of humanity trying to take our humanity away from us. I really believe it. Imagine Rudolf Steinem, that quote from 1917. He was prescient enough to recognize he was being bombarded in 1917. How about if he could be around today? I would love to hear what he would say about what we're being bombarded with today.
Yeah, I know. And life was better. And it's not black and white. It's like, life
was simpler, and simpler is better in many ways. This complex, interconnected global society that now the whole thing could be brought down because of a virus in China.
Well, that's another thing that we should take pause and look at, is we've built a society. And once again, I'm not knocking. There are certain things that I think are great. The internet, especially 10 years ago, was smashing. It's great. 5 years ago, even. They just, they changed all, it's horrible now because of politics. But the internet's great. Computers, I'm a musician and a filmmaker. Computers changed my life. So I'm not against these things. I consider these things divine manifestations, of God's creatures. I don't know. I love them. That's my point. But then there are other things that are like the mobile phone enslaves us. When I was younger, I went outside and I played. I went out and there was drama. I would experience drama with other people, which allowed me to evolve at a quicker rate, which allowed me to prepare for, the crazy world and stuff like that. But it seems to me like, and that goes back to being participants in our life. Like we're just pets. We're just accepting what we're given. I don't think anyone ever asked for a mobile phone. It was first a pager. Maybe business people were into pagers or stuff, but no one cared about wanting to take a phone around with them everywhere. How does that make anything better? You said simple, and I would agree with that. And now what's different about me now is when I was younger, I thought simple meant none of this, loincloths and rocks. That's what I used to think was simple. But I realize now that simple just means simple. Simple means simplifying your life, making your life less stressful, less worrisome, happier. I mean, that's really, in my opinion, the whole purpose of life is to pursue your happiness, to follow your heart. I believe God guides us through our heart. If we follow it, then we will find happiness. And that's why our country is so great, is because it's built so that the individual and the family, it's all built upon that, the individual and the family. That's the best. There's never been anything better. And we're not that sophisticated, we're kind of like a step away from the jungle, like I'm talking about, so I cling to these things, the First and the Second Amendment. If we ever get to a point where we're so spiritually evolved that we can let go of those things, I don't see that, but that would mean like getting rid of evil. And that's a child's dream.
Right. Well said, Greg. I appreciate your time today, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I don't know if we've necessarily swayed anybody to any particular camp, but I think one thing we're trying to do with this conversation is just re-level set and make everybody understand, look, we're all in this thing together. One way or the other, we're all in this mess together, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth, and we're all just trying to get at the truth.
I agree. I think this is the worst time to be divided. I mean, there's no good time to be divided, but this is the worst time. And I think everyone should be able to accept the fact that we don't know what's going on. None of us know what's going on. And just because you're clinging to this hope and these people are clinging to this belief or whatever, doesn't mean that we need to fight each other. I mean, talk about simple. It's quite simple. It's right there in front of us. We are all united in the sense that we are all in this together. We don't know what's going on. In a sense, we're all responsible because, I mean, we're alive and we're participating, and we all let this happen. We all allowed ourselves to become domesticated pets. And, I'm not saying we should feel bad about it. It's just a reality, but I'm just saying we should be able to empathize with each other and love each other. And that's the only thing that's going to get us to any golden age. I mean, how can we expect a golden age when we're just busy in fear and fighting? We're in a state, I think, where right now it's really up to us. And the best thing we could do is show that spirit that we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Greg, can you tell people how they can find you on social media and otherwise?
Yeah, you can find me at YouTube, Greg Reese. My channel is Greg Reese on band.video. All my videos are there on the Greg Reese channel. Twitter, I think, is a nightmare. So I don't care about Twitter, but that's at Greg Reese. But if I were to plug anything, I would ask everyone to watch a new video that I made with some friends of mine called Bit by Bat. Unless you're living in fear right now, I had one of the comments accuse me of being a fear monger, but it is a very intense video. It's not about the coronavirus so much as it's a political anti-communist China song. And I really hope some of the Chinese people in China get to see it, because I kind of hope that there's a sense of solidarity with them too. Like, it's the people of the world. It's good against evil. That's what I think. But yeah. It was great talking to you, Sean.
It's great talking with you. I watched that video. It's intriguing. I enjoyed watching it. I don't see how that's fear-mongering. Maybe they weren't listening to the lyrics. All right. Our guest has been Greg Reese, video journalist over at Infowars. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Sean.
And guys, thanks so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to my patrons and to all of you for tuning in. By the way, visit us directly for real news 24/7 at sgtreport.com. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.
You heard this being discussed in this meeting. They will release a flu-like virus that will be genetically targeted against the Chinese population. They said China will catch a cold.